We're ready? All right. Welcome to tonight's meeting here at May 20th. We were supposed to be on here 6:45. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're up and running now thanks to our Salem Lion Network. I have verified we do have a quorum, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. First thing on the docket tonight to speak about is the administrative positions for 2021.
I'll make a motion to accept the recommended administrative positions for 2021.
Ron makes a motion.
Second.
Erica Garlow second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those not in favor. Second thing is informational presentation on potential safe room projects with Ice Miller, Baker Tilly, and Kovert Hawkins Group. First up will be Kovert Hawkins Group, right?
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
First up, I'd like to introduce Jane Herndon from Ice Miller, Belvia Gray from Baker Tilly, and Tyler Luffel. Tyler, I already messed it up. Tyler from Baker Tilly. I'm sorry. Going to give us some information on some potential projects, and again, this is just for informational purposes. We're not asking for any votes tonight. Tyler, the show is yours.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Good evening, and thank you for having us, even if it's not in person. It's good to see everybody. As John said, I'm Tyler Luppelholtz with Baker Tilly, and I'll be going through the financial implications of the proposed projects. So here you will see a schedule of your current outstanding debt, and as you can see, your current debt will be completely paid off after 2025. Now here you'll see the same information as the previous slide, but in a more visually friendly format. And since your total annual payments don't start to decline until 2024, any additional debt you issue will create some impact to your debt service tax rate. But we can wrap any new debt around the existing debt and have minimal payments for the first few years, and then start making larger payments as your current debt matures. Here you'll see a calculation of your general obligation bonding capacity. Now your capacity is 1/3 of 2% of your net assessed value, which for your school district comes out to about $2.9 million. And after subtracting out your outstanding general obligation bonds after your upcoming July payments, you will have the capacity to issue about $380,000 in general obligation bonds. So what we've done is we have structured a $380,000 general obligation bond for technology improvements to be issued this year and paid back in 4 annual payments, and a $5.35 million first mortgage bond for the Safe Room project to be issued early next year and paid back in 7 annual payments. Now, the green bars you see here represent your current outstanding debt. The dark gray bars represent the 2020 GO bonds, and the light gray bars represent the 2021 first mortgage bonds. Now, as you can see, we would anticipate an increase to your total annual payments, but we made the first 3 payments of the 2021 bonds as small as possible by making them interest-only payments, and then you would start to pay principal in 2025. You would see a drop in total annual payments in 2025, and then they would be paid off in 2028. Now you do have the option, if you choose, to lengthen the term of the bonds further than we're showing here to make those last few years of payments lower. But since we're having interest-only payments for those first few years, that would increase the initial impact because you would be paying more in interest expense. So what the increase means is that we would estimate an increase in total annual payments of about $235,000, assuming interest rates that are 1% higher than current rates. And that increase would mean an estimated 5.14 cent impact to your debt service fund tax rate. And this slide summarizes how that rate impact would impact various types of property taxpayers within your district. Now, I won't read through all of these lines, but I'll point out a few of them. So someone with $106,500 home value, which is the median in your district, would see an annual impact of $19.01 or a monthly impact of $1.58. For each acre of agricultural land, there would be a 66-cent annual impact or a 5-cent per month impact per acre. And for every $100,000 of commercial or rental property, we would estimate an annual impact of $51.40 or $5.48 per month. And that is the information I have for you, but I am happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
So you were talking about on the $100,000 commercial rental property, annual tax rate impact of $51.40, but the monthly was $428, right?
Right.
And then on the 100 acres of agricultural land, to annual tax rate impact of about $65.79.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
What kind of impact would the city of Salem residents occur being currently capped on their tax rate due to the assessments of their property?
Well, these bonds would be issued inside the tax caps. So anybody who is currently at their tax caps would not see any impact as a result of these.
So then where would that money come
That's,
So, yeah,
Tyler, that's unless the assessed values are raised, is that
right.
correct?
Right.
So the assessed values are, so the cap is based on the assessed value, which the assessed value is not necessarily fixed, it fluctuates.
Right.
So if
And
the
we
assessed
make
value
all these
goes up-
assumptions based on no growth for the assessed value. So if there is any growth in the upcoming years, then their cap would be higher, so they could see an impact based on that.
So my point, what leads me to that is the fact that the residents in the city currently just were reassessed, and those reassessments increased significantly due to projects, done throughout the county of Washington, the jail project and also the courthouse renovations. So my concern is, with that assessment going up, if the taxes are capped, in your professional opinion, do you think that the assessments would go up again if a project of this magnitude was added to the current tax rate?
Well, as far as the caps and the circuit breaker loss projections, that really is a per parcel assessment that we would need to go through, and we haven't done that here, but we would certainly be willing to. We've got a third party called Policy Analytics that we can have them run some numbers. They've got information on all the parcels, and they can run some projections, and we can see how that might impact the taxpayers in general.
I did have a question about the interest rate. So this would be, the interest rate that would be borne would be 1% above prevailing interest, current interest rates or at the time of the issuance. Do you know what that total would be based upon today's rates approximately?
Yeah, these are based on current rates plus 1%, and the current rates for the general obligation bonds for this year, we would be looking at about 2.61%.
All in?
And yes, yeah. And for the larger project, we would be looking at about 2.14% based on current rates.
Okay, thank you.
explain line 5 there, number 5 on the, based on productivity factors, they change year to year?
Sure, so the $1,280 is the base rate for assessing the value of agricultural land, but that is not necessarily what each individual farmer actually is assessed at, and that value varies based on their productivity. So we just use the 1280 as a general number when putting our estimates together.
Okay. We have some other questions?
Tyler, John, I can hear jumping in. And you sent this to an email, like you said it as well here. The projections you are right now, these are the 1% over, kind of a safe projection. If we were to get the current figures, all these impacts are actually lower, correct? Am I saying that correctly, how, for what you had given us before?
Right, so with the conservative rates that are 1% higher than current, we're looking at that 5.14 cent impact.
Yeah.
But if we ran these at current rates, it would be closer to 3.9 cents.
I know you can't crystal ball it, but it's nice to have that,
Right.
that information.
Other questions?
Okay, Tyler, I really appreciate it. We're not going to just cut you loose just yet. Is there anything Ms. Gray or Ms. Herndon wants to add in? I know your time is valuable, so we won't keep you. We appreciate you doing it this way, but I also wanted to give these very savvy individuals an opportunity as well.
This is Jane Herndon from Ice Miller. Just wanted to add a reminder to the board that with regard to taxpayer and voter opposition ability for these types of projects, if you recall, Salem Schools, based on its assessed value, has a non-controlled threshold currently of $5,350,000. So to the extent a project has a total cost of $5,350,000 or less, it's non-controlled, which means there would not be a formal voter taxpayer opposition process. We would still have several school board meetings. There potentially would be public hearing opportunities depending on the amount the board decides to borrow. But there wouldn't be a formal opposition process as long as the total project cost was at $5,350,000 or less in 2020. So that's just the one comment I wanted to remind the board about. Here, if you have any other questions.
And John, this is Belvia Gray, also with Baker Tilly. I don't have anything else to add beyond what Tyler said, other than one thing that that's just hanging out there is, I know there are some questions about assessed valuation. Part of us looking at the circuit breaker would take this into account, but with what we're going through right now with COVID-19, there is also potential for assessed value to decrease as well. So we'll be taking a look at that, and we'll have that for future meetings.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I should have mentioned that before. Thank you. Doc, you got anything for him?
No, I can't think of anything. I know the assessed value increased approximately $16 million this year, but it was also our belief that agricultural land was underassessed in 2019. So we saw a deep decrease from 2018 to 2019 of about 14 million and change, and now we've experienced an increase of 16 million and change from 2019 to 2020, which may explain some of the higher assessments that have gone on in town. I don't know. That's why we rely on these fine experts that we're talking with tonight, because I'm limited at best in understanding the total picture. But I do see the numbers on our 1782 notices from the DLGF, and I can run a calculator. Thank you.
Tom, Brent, do you have any questions, concerns? Becky? I can't see. Richard? Dustin?
No questions or comments.
Ron? Bob?
I really appreciate you guys. I know it's a little bit of a maneuvering to make this work, and I sincerely appreciate your time, and I'll message you guys later tonight when I get back home, that you'll read tomorrow. So thank you so much for your assistance in providing this information.
You're very welcome.
Great, thank you.
Bob?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah. I'm going to introduce someone that I haven't met yet. Mr. John Hawkins is here for Kovert Hawkins to talk about the structural design of the potential project. And then when it's over, I would like to introduce myself personally. So, Mr. Hawkins.
I've got a PowerPoint, if we could load that up, and I can run through a few slides real quick.
While we're in a little bit of pause here, I'm pleased to announce this, congratulate all Salem teachers. It's actually all teachers across the state of Indiana. Yesterday, Dr. McCormick, State Superintendent of Public Instruction for Indiana, they made a decision that based on COVID and the complete turnaround that all teachers had to do, every teacher in the state of Indiana has been deemed the 2021 Teacher of the Year. So all of our teachers are Indiana teachers. Be pretty cool.
Thank you to our teachers.
They've done an incredible job.
Thousands of updated resumes. Teacher of the Year.
Yes.
We're just in a pause, waiting to upload a PowerPoint presentation so we can show everybody who's out there watching as well. Bear with us for a moment.
In technology, great.
Thank you guys for the adjust on the fly.
It's good.
I got it. Let's run through McDonald's.
Okay, so go ahead. Just to give you a little history. This was a master plan drawing that I did back in 2004. Around the time we finished the design on the middle school additions, you had acquired the property of Trent Nickel Zone between you and the YMCA, and did some plans for long-term wish lists. Some of these things have been accomplished. Go ahead to the next one. Included in that was the idea of an auditorium on the south end of the high school and a band and choir room addition. So the idea of an addition for a band and choir room has been floating around for at least 16 years. And the reason is there is no band or choir room at the high school. There's a band and choir room at the middle school. They are acoustically not well designed, but they are spaces. And the high school kids go to the middle school to have band and choir. So then, many years later, we did another master plan, or an update of the master plan. That blue in the middle is actually the pool renovation that was completed for the middle school. The red to the upper right was the idea that there's some work at Brady Shrum Elementary in the gym that it could use some help and renovation. The pink down on the lower left is an area of the bus barn that's had flooding problems more than one time. So we're just looking at some paving work there, some possible remediation. Then we talked about the football field and doing a turf field. And then in the upper left, go ahead to the next one. The upper left was again the idea of a band and choir room. And the dashed line was the idea of an auditorium where the tennis courts are. The next one. And so just as a quick exercise, I did a plan based on a band and choir room project that I did at Springs Valley, and just arranged those on there to see how they would fit, and did an auditorium that was based on, I forget, the one we did at Paoli or the one we did at Eastern, one of the two, just to see how they would fit. And then we did some sketches for how it could look, and then we did some computer renderings based on the sketches. It's a little dark, but that shows how it would stair step up. And a little connector to a future auditorium there through the doors. And inside the choir room, looking at the band room with the little courtyard and the classrooms on the right. And then the band and choir room addition with lots of glass. And the idea of doing this was postponed, and we did the pool project. So then as the pool project was coming to an end, the idea resurrected again, and it was, well, could we do this and not impact the tennis courts? So we just took that same plan, flopped it around to see if it would fit. And in fact, it turns out there had been a couple designs by another architecture firm for a band and choir room in this same location. Since that time, we've now hired their key person. So we've got his knowledge on those projects and designs that we've added in. And then we got a call, or Jill Sagasser got a call, and Larry Temperman in our office got a call, and then Jill called Larry. Apparently the state was having trouble getting people to apply for grants for their FEMA allocations. And the reason that is because it's a lot of work. It's an extraordinary amount of work to apply for these grants. And architecture firms like ours have to front the cost. You cannot be under contract with an architect to be eligible for these grants. So a lot of architecture firms that are busy, they just don't want to spend the money to do it on the possibility that you may get a grant. So the grants are competitive and they're very expensive to apply for, and it's just tough to find architects that know anything about them. Larry Temperman's the most knowledgeable expert in the state on these safe room projects, and we're learning from Larry, and then it's a lot of work to try and get them. So Larry kind of tweaked the design a little bit of, what could we do to turn this project into a safe room that would be eligible for the FEMA grants. And FEMA pays 75% of what they call the eligible costs. So there are some costs that they don't pay for because they don't feel they're essential to a safe room. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason from my perspective as to what they deem as eligible. But for example, something that they deem as ineligible is flooring. They will pay for concrete, but they won't pay for carpet or tile. During the process of applying for the grant, we had some communications about whether or not they would pay for ceilings. They determined that they would pay for ceilings, but they would not pay for the special ceiling that you needed in a band room with the big fancy thick ceiling tiles to help the acoustics. So we have to break down eligible costs and ineligible costs, present them, and then there's a negotiation process with FEMA that goes back and forth. They deem some as not eligible. We argue with them. And by and large, probably 90% of this project is an eligible cost. They won't pay for floors. They won't pay for the fancy acoustical tiles. They won't pay for a couple of little rooms that we're not hardening. So there's an intense cost estimating process that we have to go through. And there were negotiations with FEMA about, okay, what are these costs based on? Larry ended up having to go to Indianapolis and have a meeting with them and explain to them that, look, you know, we can't even be hired to do this yet. We're receiving no money, so we can't bid this out to contractors yet. We don't have those drawings, but we're basing the costs on the elementary school project. Is that you guys, one of the few school systems, one of the few people in the state that have gotten funding to build a safe room. So we've used those costs, applied some inflation factors, and that's a bulk of the work that we've done was try and apply the costs. And you know, we have to analyze different structural systems. Like you can't just do a metal deck like you would do on a regular school building. You have to do a precast or poured-in-place concrete roof deck. And you can't just do the big glass windows that were in the renderings that I did, because the windows have to be able to withstand the tornadoes. So, you know, we've cut out a bunch of the windows, still try and reflect the original idea, but what's called harden the space to make it more resilient and able to stand up to the tornado. So the next slide shows the summary of this cost estimate. The eligible cost column is on the left. The ineligible costs, I mean, you can see the first one there on the left is they don't pay for landscaping. Then down towards the bottom, they don't pay for some painting. They'll pay for some of the painting, but not for all of the painting. They won't pay for flooring. Up in the upper right, they'll pay for a restroom, but they won't pay for a mirror. I mean, just kind of silly stuff like that. They won't pay for any countertops for some reason. And so you get down to the bottom, and they came up with about 1.3 million in ineligible costs. The total cost of the project was 6.4. $6.4, then FEMA will pay 75% of the eligible costs, which are the 5.1. And so the total is they'll pay about 3.9, and you would have to come up with 2.6. So during the time that we were designing and working on the grant for this project, we had the idea of we could do a safe room project at the middle school too, and then you'd have all three schools with a safe room. So that's the next slide. First the schedule. We had to come up with a schedule. We didn't base it on a date when we submitted the grant. We based it on a number of days. So this schedule plugs in those number of days into dates. It was based on the last board meeting in May, but I had about a 13-month construction period, so project would be closed out May of 2022. And then next slide is the middle school. This seemed to be a real long shot to me, and in fact we ran into some difficulty with the people from FEMA because they had done some calculations based on the population. You cannot justify these safe rooms based on the population of the school. You have to justify these safe rooms based on the population of a certain radius around the safe room. And so River Hills and Jill and Chelsea helped us out with some census data, and we proved to FEMA that there was a sufficient population to justify not only the safe room at the high school, the elementary school, but also the middle school. And you have to remember, these are community-wide safe rooms. So you have to let anybody, if they can get there, you have to let them in. If the tornado's already there, then it's too late. But I forget the time travel, but it's something like within a 5-minute travel radius is the population count that they use. So the idea at the middle school was there was a need for space that could be used and not let anybody into the whole entire middle school. That's kind of a problem with the way that thing was designed in the 1970s. It's a very difficult, it's a very strange design. It's very difficult to segregate off sections and say, okay, well, we could let people come in after hours here. So what this does is adds on to the front with a big multi-purpose room, a little kitchen, not really a commercial kitchen, but a warming type kitchen or concession type kitchen with restrooms that could be opened up for games. So you could have concessions for a softball or baseball game or a softball game or soccer here. You could rent it out for events. You could have graduation, or you could have award ceremonies in here for a golf team or that kind of thing. There are lots of groups that struggle for space. The presentation room is pretty heavily utilized. The auditorium at the middle school is an inflexible space for something like an award ceremony for a small group like a golf team or a tennis team. So I thought, well, this would make a good use, and we'd do a little vestibule so you could have a separate entrance, and we'd have a ramp that we'd build. We have to have an emergency generator with these projects, so the way that flows downhill, we thought, okay, we could do a little kind of basement on a part of this thing. We could put the emergency generator down in the basement. And I never really thought that this would be approved by FEMA. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time. I never really did any renderings on it like we did for the band room. We didn't think through it very well. It's just, we'll put it together and see if they fund it. And so the cost is the next one on this. There again, they don't pay for flooring and they don't pay for mirrors. So the eligible costs are about $4.7 million. It's a more difficult site than the band room, and even though it's a 7,000 square foot versus 11,000 square foot, it's still close to the same cost. So they'll pay for about $3.5 million, and you need to come up with about $2.4 million. So altogether, FEMA is willing to award both of, they have awarded both of these projects if you will accept the money. And that's $7 million that you can get. And the only string that's attached is you have to build these as a safe room to their standards. And that's factored into the cost that we've included here. And like Baker Tilly, we factor in some, we're just guessing at what a construction bid would be in 2021. So we factored in some fat. hopefully there's enough fat in there that it comes in under budget. So far, we've got a pretty good track record for the last 30 years or so. Then the schedule on this one, what my thought was, and maybe we could talk about this if somebody has a different idea, but I think these two things would be a very attractive project for one contractor to have to do simultaneously. I think you could attract a lot of really high-quality, competitive bids with this. And the way that we typically would structure that is we would say, okay, we're bidding the high school, we're bidding the middle school, and now give us a third bid for what would it be if we gave both of them to you. And a lot of times you'll get a discount. The contractor will give you a discount off the price if you let them do a package like that. But you don't bid it as a package, because if nobody's can give you a discount, it turns out better to have two contractors than you would have two separate contractors instead of one. So that's my thought of how we would bid it. The time frame would run concurrently. The schedule ultimately has to be approved by Indiana Homeland Security, and they are supposed to send that information to River Hills here sometime soon. Chelsea wasn't sure the exact schedule with everything being shut down. But hopefully, they give us a little slippage on the schedule that I've proposed, since we're a little bit behind what the proposed schedule was from the May board meeting. That's all I have.
We might have some questions. Open it up for some questions.
I have, maybe not a question, but I do have a statement that with the elementary school, the safe room that we already have in place, with COVID, the jail has been closed, and that is where they have opened it up whenever there's bad weather, and they couldn't, because the Justice Center has been closed to the public. So we opened up the elementary school, if there should be severe weather, to the public or to the community. And I just want to say that we've already opened that to that when we do have severe weather at this time with the COVID, going through all the procedures of taking temperatures, of course, and going through the procedures. But I do want to say what a wonderful blessing that has been, and to have that for our community. And I think the other two projects look like they would be promising and a great asset too, as well.
There was it's actually a 2018 study, and there's a report by IU that they did last year, I think it was. And Tornado Alley is actually shifting to the east. The frequency of tornadoes in Texas and Oklahoma is going down. They still have more tornadoes overall than we have, but the frequency is increasing towards the east. And the highest part is just to the southwest of us, around Missouri and western part of Tennessee and Kentucky. But this southern part of Indiana is in a part where that frequency is rising, and it's all part of weather patterns, but the whole Tornado Alley is starting to shift east. So if it feels like there are more tornadoes, it's because there are. Washington County had a emergency planning map that was from 2008, and I compared it to the map in the IU study from 2018, and it doubled. The number of tornadoes that were on that map doubled. I think there are over 30 tornadoes that are plotted on that map now.
I think you answered some questions when I first came on the board. One of my first questions is why don't more people apply for this? And being in business myself and going through paperwork, anything that has to do with FEMA, anybody that's dealt with a natural disaster or whatnot knows that it's a lot of work. But secondly, that you pointed out, is to have an architect that's willing to do the work without getting paid. So those are some questions I had that you answered.
Yeah, if I'd have known how much it was going to be, I probably would have told Larry no, but I wasn't that smart.
Yeah. So it's I think they're both great additions. It's a perfect scenario. Do you think that that'll change, given the situation with the pandemic? I mean, so that money, if we were to accept, it won't change, will not change?
If you don't accept the money, it will go back, and if Indiana is not able to award it to somebody else, which I don't think they will be in this cycle, and it'll go back to the federal government, and it'll go to somebody else in some other state.
Well, I mean, my question is, so if we do accept that, won't change given the, so I think some of the questions with FEMA is the money that they're giving out in other categories, could that be taken away after
No,
we start?
it's been awarded.
Okay.
Yeah. All you have to do is accept it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, you got more money awarded to you than all the other Indiana applications combined.
That speaks volumes to the work that everyone has done here. I'm the newbie. I just show up, we go to the state finals in basketball, show up, and you get $7 million awarded from FEMA. But, so there's already been a victory just getting this award and it's decided if this is for the community. And I really like what you had said before, and these rooms have the capacity not just to protect our children, but to protect the citizens of Salem, and you expand upon it even greater. I've been that administrator where the storm hits and you're in the middle of the basketball game or in the middle of the football game and you're scurrying people inside the building. It'd be a lot more comforting to say we're going into the tornado safe room than it was in the hallways of the high school. So, thank you. I really appreciate your time.
John, may I ask, what is the capacity? How many people can go to one of the rooms?
It's 5 square foot per person, so that requires higher level math. Hang on. Not 100% of the space is hardened, but let's say it's something like 1,200 people in each one. You don't plan for them to be there forever, so they let the building code actually allows you to cram a higher capacity in there.
Thank you.
John, could you talk a little bit about the timeline of when do we need to make a decision? And what does it, can we put this off till September, or do we need to act now?
No, you can't put it off till September, because what's going to happen is Indiana Homeland Security is going to send Chelsea the schedule. And there will be a deadline on when you have to have spent this money. So it's not easy to construct these projects. There are a lot of long lead items. You don't just go to Home Depot and pick up an emergency generator that's big enough to run a facility like this. So it's not unusual in our industrial projects to have 6-month lead time on a generator. And that's if it's a common size. We can have lead times on generators that are over a year for large ones. We have to have precast walls and precast roof decks. So yeah, there's 13 months is probably a pretty aggressive schedule on a project like this. So now I'm afraid that what would happen if you delay too much is you'll get the schedule from Homeland Security and it'll be game over because you can't spend the money that fast.
John, I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but so just to make sure I understand. So basically, we're sitting here with a situation where FEMA, federal government, whatever the case may be, state of Indiana has said we will give, if you do this project, we will pay for 75 cents of every dollar. And that's open to every school district in the state of Indiana.
It's open to every single public body in the state of Indiana. So you could have a fire station that could apply for this money. or a county government that could apply for this money. It's an obscure grant. There are not a lot of people that know about it, but each state gets an allocation every year, similar to those focus fund grants that you may be familiar with. Each state gets an allocation from FEMA, and the states have trouble spending the money because not enough people are applying for the grants.
So with that being said, my understanding is that we Salem Community Schools is the only school corporation in the state of Indiana to have applied or working towards having been awarded, and therefore having done the work to get awarded. We're the only, is that a correct statement?
I believe that that is a correct statement, that to my knowledge, you are the only school corporation that has ever been awarded a safe room. I know some other school corporations have gotten grant money under this program for some things, but not for a whole entire building addition at a school that was also a safe room. And there is nobody in the state of Indiana that would have every single one of their facilities, K through 12, protected with a safe room.
I can add a little to that. We've actually had churches in our community that have applied for this who did not receive it. So it is, I mean, it has been, others in the community have applied. And I think we have 3 schools that do in the state of Indiana now. We were the only ones, and I do believe, for a while. And to have all 3, and kind of going back to the history, when we were given the green light for the first safe room, it was a hard decision on the board because we got 3 schools, and which school do you pick of the 3? And we decided to start because the elementary had the most students, and so we decided to use that. And now that we have the opportunity to possibly have it for the middle school and the high school, I think it would be a lot better for parents who have middle school students and high school students that have that security, and for our community to have that extra coverage of whatever event or whichever school is closest for them to take shelter in.
I stand corrected.
But with that being said, you spoke a little bit about it in terms of, my questions and or concerns would be, if that money is available at a 75% match, I'm a little curious as to why, and you spoke to the complexity of the process and all that, obscurity and of all that, but so that tells me there must be some strings. There's a reason in my mind that others are not jumping up and down looking for free money.
The strings,
in air quotes.
yeah, the strings are you have to build it to FEMA standards. So, you can't build with metal stud or wood studs. You have to build out of concrete. So there is a higher construction cost. You have to pay a Davis-Bacon wage, which at one time was a fairly significant premium. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, it was a significant premium on a construction project. Right now, it's not a huge premium because it may change, but before March, there was a severe shortage of workers in the construction industry. So, wages were high, even for non-union companies. So the wage scale really didn't affect anybody's bids like it did 20 years ago. So those are the 2 premiums that you pay for the construction versus if you just went and built a band room on your own and didn't try to do it as a safe room. But they give you 75 cents, and the premium is probably in the 10 to 20% range. So, you still are coming out ahead, and you have a benefit for the premium. In the old days, when you had to pay a wage scale, the argument was, well, you get a higher quality project, but it's difficult to judge that objectively. In this case, you're getting a safe room. It's an objective standard that you're meeting, and the government's helping pay for you. But absolutely, the 2 reasons that more people don't apply for it is just like I was when Larry was with another firm and got you the first safe room money. my head was spinning. You know, why do I not know about this? He just had better knowledge about the program than anybody else, and he still does. And the second reason is, it's an incredible amount of work, not just for us, but for River Hills too. It is, you know, I'm helping Gene Hedrick get some grant money for the John Hay Center, and you know, I've spent 8-10 hours. You know, I've got 800 hours on this thing. It's just an incredible amount of work.
Would
I
there be,
recall the last time that we built the safe room at the elementary, just finding the standards that FEMA would accept for the windows alone was an obstacle.
Yes, at that time it
And
was.
just the concrete, the quality of concrete that was accepted.
Yes.
I mean, it's so entailed that, you know, it's just, it's not something you're going to put together quickly. And if I also recall, I believe it took 2 years of writing getting the information ready just
Yeah.
to apply for the safe room
We-
the first time.
We started on both of these grants in October of 2018.
Go back to Tom, Mr. Cypher's question, he asked about time frame, and you may have answered, maybe I just missed it. What is when would this board, what is the latest point in which this board can make a decision, yea or nay? And here's why I asked the question. There is a tremendous amount of uncertainty what next year looks like in terms of student population, the structure of you know, are they physically going to be at the building? And I'm trying to get past this. Does it make sense to, if potentially we have a decline in student population, does it make sense to add on additional fixed expenses? And so with that in mind, do you know when is the drop? And what I'm getting at, I think we need more clarity as to whether or not that makes sense.
Go to the next
Based
slide.
upon what this year or next year and the subsequent years may look like in terms of.
So this date, the key starting point is receiving the environmental release, which I had receiving by June 8th. When I talked to Chelsea last Friday, she was expecting the environmental release any time. So then our start date was June 8th. So if it's delayed past June 8th from my end, I can't meet my timeline. And that pushes the timeline for everything back, because I'm already, really should have about an 18-month construction period on it, but I think we can speed it up and do it in 13.
So in terms of our ability to accept the 75% match, what's that time frame? Is it?
You know, I'd say ideally the next board meeting, assuming that Homeland Security, Indiana Homeland Security comes back with the schedule that I'm expecting. In other words, they come back with the schedule that we gave them in the grant, then we would be able to meet this timeline for sure by the June meeting. Past the June meeting, it's really getting iffy. Past the July meeting, there's no way. Just no way.
But will we have the answer to that question by the June meeting? Whether or not we had to act in the June meeting?
Yes, that's what we're trying to work out with Chelsea as soon as we can get that schedule from Homeland Security.
my question would be, is there any variation in these plans at all? Or is that pretty much what we're stuck building?
Well, there's some variation. You know, we just gave them conceptual designs. So, and, you know, we have to meet with all of the stakeholders and do a more thorough design. So, yeah, there would be some changes, but, you know, you couldn't, and you could probably change the location. So if, for example, you decided, you know what, we could move the tennis courts in the future and make room for an auditorium, so let's put it back where you had it in that very early scheme, down closer to Harrison Street. We could do that. But you can't say, oh, we've decided we don't want to build something at the middle school now. We want to go over here to the other end of the high school and build something. They're not going to let you do that. Pretty much have to stay to the same project at the same location that you said.
Any further questions? Brent, Dr. Thurston?
No, thank
Are
you.
there any other restrictions on the utilization of the space during non-safe room times?
No. The only restriction is you have to be open to the public in the event that there is an emergency.
We appreciate you coming
All
out,
right.
all the work that you've done.
Thank you.
We'll discuss.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Good job.
I appreciate everybody coming out. This was a special meeting, given the situation with COVID-19 and whatnot. Mr. Acton and myself had to determine we may have a couple special meetings to determine some stuff, get information out, touch base with people, so we can make solid decisions for our school and for our community. Our next meeting, if we do a special meeting, we'll let you guys know probably within the next week. Otherwise, it'll be our June regular meeting. Thanks for coming out and enjoy your holiday weekend. We appreciate it. You have a motion to
Motion
close?
adjourned.
So moved.
Becky gives us a motion to close the meeting.
Becky.
Becky gave the motion.
I'll second.
Dustin